Hello, everybody. Michael Tracy here. So, today, Trump signed an executive order, and this is an order that had been in the works for some time. If you remember back in February, a draft of a potential order that was being considered was leaked, and the order has to do with religious liberty or protecting religious freedoms, things along those lines. And the order that was leaked in February was rather dramatic. It would have taken tangible steps to allow entities that contract with the federal government to potentially discriminate on the basis of sexual orientation or gender identity. But it turns out that the one issued today was basically symbolic. I was actually on the TYT main show last night, yesterday, and we discussed the potential of this being enacted, and the version that we discussed on the show was a lot more far-reaching than the one that was just issued today. So that's why it's really important to be very wary of leaks about potential Trump executive orders, because there are a lot of competing interests who try to basically dupe journalists into running with various stories that might help push the agenda in one way or another. But the one this religious liberty order that came out today was so substanceless that the ACLU, which has a massive influx of resources at this point and could sue basically anybody to high heaven without really taking much of a financial hit, they said today, quote, "We thought we'd have to sue Trump today, but it turned out the order signing was an elaborate photo op with no discernible policy outcome. And, quote, the status quo has not changed." So this is another instance of there being much to do about nothing, I think. Or much ado about nothing, rather. People getting worked up about the worst possible directive that Trump could hand down, and then the reality of it is a lot more toothless than people might have assumed. So if you look at what the people who are actually legitimately concerned about religious liberty have to say in the wake of this, they're saying that it's basically a ruse. So, for example, Robert George, who is a Princeton professor, probably the most influential conservative Christian intellectual in the entire country, who has been the brains behind much of the conservative Christian rights organizing efforts in recent years. He said, quote, "The religious liberty executive order is meaningless. No substantive protections for conscience, a betrayal. Ivanka and Jared won, we lost." Because, part of what this does is it leaves in place the protections that were instituted by an Obama executive order in 2014, which prohibited entities that contract with the federal government from discriminating on the basis of sexual orientation or gender identity. And this doesn't touch that. The words LGBT or gender identity and so forth don't appear anywhere in this order at all. And another thing that this addresses is the so-called Johnson Amendment, which Trump at various times has denounced and called for the total dissolution of. And the Johnson Amendment basically prohibits religious institutions that enjoy tax exempt status from actively politicking. But the thing is, this amendment is so infrequently enforced that it's almost meaningless. So in this order, Trump basically restates his position that the executive branch should not take actions that unduly penalize speech, political speech in a religious context. But the thing is, that's what the status quo is currently. There's only been one instance that has been recorded, at least according to certain analyses of this, only one instance in the past number of decades of the Johnson Amendment actually being enforced, and that was almost 18 years ago at this point. So for Trump to have issued a directive encouraging the non-enforcement of this particular IRS code amendment really doesn't alter the status quo at all. It just kind of leaves things in place, maybe slightly codifies it, but certainly doesn't change anything enough that the ACLU felt compelled to take any legal action. So you have organizations like the true blood religious conservative organizations calling the order disappointingly vague. Brian Fisher of the American Family Association, somebody whose show I've actually been on in the past, he complained that Trump offered no government protection for the civil rights of Christian bakers, florists, and photographers who were victims of discrimination. So maybe it was unrealistic on the part of these Christian conservatives to think that one executive order could ameliorate their concerns about the encroachment of state authority into matters of individual conscience in terms of religious liberty, but at the same time, there definitely was in the realm of possibility that Trump could have taken more tangible action here. So they're even some Christian leaders are calling it a quote nothing burger because they are apparently willing to use those sort of nonsense phrases in addition to liberal media types who coined the phrase. Anyway, that's not relevant. What's relevant is not much was done here except for Trump to kind of do something to shore up his religious conservative base. He had a big photo op at the White House today. He invited conservative Christian leaders for a dinner that was held last night, and they stayed around for some kind of a ceremony today. And for conservative Christians, it can sometimes be meaningful even to be in the mix, even if it's just on an optical level or an optics level. But in terms of substance, the order that was signed today, and which was much discussed earlier this week, really doesn't do much in the way of changing the status quo. So that is just a brief update, and maybe there'll be more about this to say in the future, but for now, have a wonderful day.